in 2000, the year 2000, I was just a student. And in 2001, 9/11 happened. And I remember struggling with my identity. Everybody was cautious, even when we travel. Should we speak Arabic? Should we say that I'm from the Middle East? Should I take sides? So that was only one example of what we are facing nowadays. I think we have a rich history in terms of our Arabic and Islamic, let's say, earth, or say maybe literature, or the civilization overall. So we need to understand that. We have to have a good foundation so we can make decisions in the future, and we make good decisions that are shaping our future overall. So I'm here today to hear any suggestion or maybe any thoughts about the national identity, where we should go, where we should direct ourselves and efforts in the future endeavor as a youth minister.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I guess we as a youth, we need to understand our culture and national identity. However, I want to turn to Dr. Roy, who also understood the Arab national identity perspectives. Please, the floor is yours.
Okay, so the first thing that pops into my mind is we probably have to have a discussion of what a nation is. So a nation is a group of people with 5 things in common. A common identity, and the identity can be external or internal. And what I mean by that is, internal is you say I am, so you identify. External is people outside are identifying you. So I'll give you the fun example. In the United States, if you're from the Middle East, so Arab, Turk, Jewish, or Persian, you are supposed to put white. But when you're walking down the street, it's very likely that Americans aren't going, oh, look at that white person. In other words, there's an external identity, internal identity in that moment where you're checking off white when, by everybody's standards in the United States, Arabs are not white. So, in addition to identity, and that's the critical piece, because without identity, there's no nation. The next most important piece, but it's not quite as important, is language. So, for example, I'm an 8th Italian. I don't speak Italian. That doesn't make me not Italian. But when I meet Italians, right, if I say I'm an 8th Italian, they're like, whatever. So, language is obviously critical and important. The next 3 components, there's no like rank order, and every nation has a different sort of mixture of this, but common history, common DNA, so people from the same nation will look similar to each other, and then of course, common traditions, so similar food, similar way of dressing, right? So then at that point, the question becomes, what would be the national identity? And if you're Arab, the national identity gets really confusing, because are you Emirati or are you Arab? Which is the nation? So are you in the same nation with Moroccans and Syrians and Egyptians, or are you in a separate nation? And right, for the longest time, that's been a little bit of a struggle in the Arab world, whether to identify more as Arab or identify more as your country. And so depending on where you go, you'll hear different discussions about this. Like, I've traveled to Morocco and I've heard that conversation and that argument. I've traveled to Egypt and you hear it there as well. On top of that, there's the importance of nations. So your nationality, your national identity, however confused, and I have a terribly confused national identity. However confused it is, it also is a guide. So the analogy that I give for why you should learn history and why you should learn the history of your people is, if I took you and I use like Star Trek transporter, and without telling you where I'm putting you, put you on a boat in an ocean. And I gave you a map and a compass, but I didn't tell you which ocean or where in that ocean I put you. That map and that compass are completely useless to you. You'll never, right? Because no matter what direction you go, you have no idea if it's the right direction. You need to know where you were for the map and the compass to become useful. And that's what history does for us. It informs us how we got here to this moment now. And so one of the problems that I think we've had in the planet is the people who have done most of the historical writing in the contemporary period were Europeans who had a very specific agenda. And that agenda, to a large degree, was to erase the Middle East, just wipe it out to the best of their ability. So for my own personal education, I was 19, I'll never forget the moment, I grabbed a book written by an Englishman, Sir John Bagot Glub Basha, because he got the title Basha when he was in the Transjordanian army. And it was about Arab history, and I thought, as I was reading it, every word was like a piece of honey. I couldn't believe that I had never heard any of it, because it was such an amazing, epic story that I was reading. It transformed me. And then I realized, oh, if they've erased this, what else have they erased? So I think one of the things that Arabs have to do is they have to sort of reclaim that past and get in there and then find out what happened, what really happened, get past the Orientalism that's been heaped on top of the whole planet. But there's always a caution. Too many times we've seen in history where people use nationality and nationhood to create arrogance and this sort of self-righteousness. Know who you are and where you come from so that you can understand who you are and the people around you. But realize that everybody on earth is of equal value. Like, don't let nationality and your pride in your nation become something that turns negative and toxic. And so there's a balancing act there. And, you know, like, as a person who's also, I'm part German, like, that's the freak out moment for nationalism for the world, right? And I'm much more German than I am Italian. I'm one-eighth, but I speak German and I lived in Germany. So when I meet a German and I say I'm one-eighth German, I say it in German. That changes the dialogue and the conversation. And so that's my caution. Mm-hmm. Just, there needs to be a limit to how far you let nation and national identity take you.
A question came to my mind from what you mentioned, Dr. Roy, to His Excellency Dr. Sultan. So as Dr. Roy mentioned, we need to kind of showcase our national identity. And I think a great example of an Emirati astronaut going to the space agency is a great example to showcase our identity to the world. So if you can tell me more, Your Excellency, on how the national identity shaped your journey towards the agency.
Very good question. I think we all as human, we have goodness in us. And I realized that we aim for the same thing, and we try and strive to reach a certain point where we are good humans. For example, during my training, we are trained as astronauts to gain a specific set of skills. It's called expeditionary skills. And it is exactly the same as the word that we use, sana. It's to be kind, to be supportive, to interact, to laugh when you need to laugh, to be silent when you have to be silent. And it's basically the social intelligence. This is exactly the same. So I think overall, like different cultures, specifically here in the UAE, they, for example, introduced the Sana course or maybe education. But I think it is in us. We gain the Sana, the social intelligence, the expeditionary skills from our houses. Coming back from my generation, the 80s, I think we had a lot of interaction with our neighbors, our friends, the elders. So I feel that we are missing this now. You can definitely maybe disagree with me, but even when I interact with my kids now, they're always reluctant to go and speak to an elder. They feel shy, or maybe they're more comfortable talking to somebody who's in their age rather than talking to somebody who's younger than them. Or so overall, I think what I saw in the International Space Station is definitely a real example of you can call it sana or expeditionary skills or social intelligence So we go there for a target, for a reason, which is pushing the envelope and pushing the envelope of exploration and being a good member for the betterment of humanity. So I think this is what we're lacking. You can definitely disagree with me, is the social skills when it comes to interacting with others. And what makes it worse is not understanding our history. And I think this is my take on that.
Indeed, Your Excellency. So the evolution of the national identity, or the evolution of the skill sets required for the children compared to the current generation, is something that I've read about it personally a lot. What is your intake, Dr. Roy, from your experience on this evolution?
You mean like in what way would knowing your history affect how you...
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, so I think, and this is, just my experience. So first of all, let me out part of my identity, because I've already outed part. I'm half Egyptian, so just to mess with you, Ana Nussa Masri, Ana Arab. And my identity is Arab, just to be clear, but I present as white. So when I'm in the United States, I learned really early on, don't say you're Arab, just don't. I had there was a moment where a friend of mine, she was an older woman, we were playing Scrabble, and there were two other older women in the room, and she said, "This is my Arab boy," and the look those two women gave me was just venom. And it was like, whoa, okay, so this is apparently a bad thing to be. What I have grown up with was a lot of shame, being Arab and having to sort of hide my identity. After 9/11, I became even less likely to out my identity. And then I realized it was a tool, because I discovered that when white people know I'm Arab, it changes how they listen to me. And that it's easier for me to just fail to mention that and just go. And I had it on my website. You could have looked it up. I wasn't hiding it. I did take it off recently, though. My point in saying all of this is, as I learned about our history and undid the Orientalism that had been heaped into my life, it was really easy to lose some of that shame. You think of the period of time, especially the 10th and the 11th centuries, where so much philosophy was coming out of the Middle East. Philosophy that was being made by Arab and Persian philosophers like Farabi and Ibn Sina, Ibn al-Haytham. The stuff that they did was completely transformative. They changed the world. The Arabs, somewhere between 750 and 800, invented modern agriculture. Arabs, somewhere between 750 and 800, invented the world's first industrial factories. They didn't have steam power, so when the English say they did it, right, they mean they added steam power to the factories. But the factories were 1,000 years old when they did it. Ibn al-Haytham is the guy who invented the lens. So every morning I thank him as I put my eyes on. And right, he's the guy who said all objects in the universe exert gravity, that light has a finite speed, it travels in waves. How did he observe all these things? He reinvented the camera obscura, right, because Lao Tzu had invented it. But then the Chinese decided to delete their knowledge and tried to destroy Lao Tzu. So that knowledge was lost, and then Ibn al-Haytham brought it back. And then Ibn Sina invented modern medicine and transformed the way we deal with medicine. And these achievements and these accomplishments sort of got erased. Ibn al-Haytham is the guy who created the world's first ever scientific method. It wasn't Francis Bacon like I was taught in school, or Galileo like I was taught in school. It was Ibn al-Haytham. He had a 6-step scientific method. I don't know what the other 2 steps were, but I should look that up. But just the fact that all of these achievements happened and that we were part of it, or to be more precise, our ancestors were part of this, that it had been erased, and it was like it had been stolen from us. And it's important for us to go back and re-examine this. Having said that, there's also a daunting piece to this. So you're an Egyptian, you live in Giza. The pyramids are right there. You see them every day. They're impossible to avoid. And that's also dangerous. And the reason it's dangerous, I'm not saying we shouldn't have the pyramids, to be clear, I love them. It's dangerous because it reminds you of how far we've fallen also. And that can also be a point of shame. So what we need to do is we need to just recognize that history is this rolling thing. Sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down. All of it combined brought us here to this moment. We should celebrate it, talk about it, dump the shame to the extent we can. Don't replace it with hyper pride, because that's also bad. And it's a lie, just to be clear. Like, I didn't build the pyramids, my ancestors built the pyramids. I had nothing to do with the pyramids. I can look at it and be really proud of my great, I don't have enough time for the rest of the greats, grandfather, but I didn't have anything to do with it, so it's not pride in myself. It's pride in my ancestors. So we need to be clear about those things as we go forward. But again, this is the only way we know who we are. And this is how, unfortunately or fortunately, how we have to relate to the rest of the world, especially because, I don't know if you know this, but the Arab world got chopped up into little pieces and is pitted off against itself, and empires come in and smash up Arab countries, and it's been rough.
We come to an end of our youth circle. I believe it's your first youth circle, Your Excellency. More to come, inshallah. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Dr. Roy, for your insights, and thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you.